Oops, small glitch. This happens. Hello, welcome back. It's been a couple of weeks since the last Zephyr Tech Talk. Really happy to be back with yet another interesting deep dive in something Zephyr. Today is going to be about IDEs or code editors, depending on how you want to call them, and getting help and getting support from a language server protocol. So kind of like maybe a new term for some of you, but yeah, how do you get good Devicetree support in your code editor is going to be the topic for today. So we're going to give a few minutes for people to join as always. So whether you're joining us from YouTube, LinkedIn, please say hi if you feel like it in the chat, whether it's YouTube or LinkedIn. Say hi, maybe where you're joining us from. I'm Benjamin. You probably know that by now. Joining from France. We're I guess headed into the summer. Pretty hot day today. So yeah, let's see. We have in the chat, and in the meantime, we can already bring in our guest. As a reminder, and I will be reminding you many times. This is meant to be interactive. Like this is live. You join in. Most of you join live, and you can use the chat to ask questions, right? And to or to share thoughts, comments. We will be sharing, I guess, lots of tips and tricks today regarding VS Code and Vim and like just Zephyr programming in general. Do share your own tips as well. Like if you feel like we're going to demo something that you feel that you're more efficient with your own approach, do share that. Like there's obviously tons of useful tips worth discussing. So with that, and I don't see anyone in the chat, like come on, people, tell us where you're joining us from. I hope this is not a bug from the system. But yeah, hoping to hear from you, from LinkedIn, YouTube. And in the meanwhile, let's bring in Kyle, our guest for today. Hey, Kyle, how's it going?
Very good. Thanks.
I guess you start. You tell us where you're joining us from, and maybe this will encourage people in the chat to chime in as well. There we go. We have Mohammed from Pakistan. Hello, Mohammed. So, Kyle, you're based. Where are you based?
I'm based in Trondheim. I'm a bit further south. I'm in Skaun, but yes, it's not hot here. It's raining actually.
Okay. Yeah. So you're basically from the Nordics because you happen to be working for Nordic Semiconductor, right?
Correct.
Okay. And so yeah, the topic for maybe tell us a bit about yourself. Like, what's your background with regards to Zephyr, and maybe we can then dive into LSP after that.
Yes, perfect. So my background with Zephyr was a requirement to build tools for it in my daily job, and because of that, I needed to dig deeper into Devicetree, and I got motivated to read the spec, which led into trying to create a parser, which then led into an LSP. And I had certain requirements I wanted from it as a challenge to myself, and I thought they would be convenient. And then today we have the current repo in its current state with the current feature set. So I'm not an embedded developer. I am mostly
you were sharing that before we start. I think that's good info, good background. I think that's an asset actually in the context of today's sort of like discussion, because you probably you come at it more like from the specification perspective, which is good.
Yeah, so I am sure there are better people than me that know deep information about Devicetree and perhaps other features that are not available right now that I am not aware of, and they're not perhaps well documented, so I couldn't find them. So I will be very excited to get to see people to say, why don't we add, for example, a new feature here, a new validation, or this can be improved, so on and so forth. So that's my motivation here, and I'm looking forward to all the feedback.
Okay, cool. So yeah, again, so today the topic, and it was kind of a challenge when I put together the sort of like the promotion material for this for today's tech talk. I wasn't sure how to approach it because LSP, language server protocol, is kind of like an obscure beast maybe from people. But yeah, essentially the idea and today's talk is going to be all about getting syntax highlighting and more in your editor when it comes to Devicetree, right? And so these days, and you will explain it way better than I would, but just as a way to kick off the conversation, these days, basically IDEs like VS Code and others, the way things like syntax highlighting, autocompletion, etc., is implemented is through so-called language server protocols. And so maybe you can, and I'm going to put your screen. Do you want to zoom a bit your browser
Yes.
as well, like you did for the other? Um, and so yeah, let's tell us a bit more about what that is. I think, if I'm not mistaken, this is actually originating from sort of like the VS Code / Microsoft ecosystem originally, but this became sort of like a de facto open standard. With that, I'm going to pause and actually ask, and there's quite a few people on the chat, so that's great. Hi, everyone. Obvious question to you all: what IDE or code editor, again, depending on how you want to call it, what are you using? Is this VS Code? Is this JetBrains CLion, Emacs, Vim, Notepad++? Please share. I kind of have a sense of what the majority of you use, but I and we might be surprised. So yeah, what is an LSP then?
Yes, so Microsoft developed this protocol and it's been evolving. So you can see multiple versions of it. And in each version, they basically explain um, this protocol of how to communicate between a client. You've got the LSP client, which is your text editor, and the LSP server, which is the device tree, in this case, LSP server. And the LSP server needs to basically pass in data for certain requests to the client, and then the client will render them as configured, as designed by that editor. And of course, the server needs to advertise the capabilities because you might not have everything. For example, if we look at a sample here, there are, for example, go to declaration, go to definition, go to types. These are all different features, and not all languages might have them, and they might not all be necessary. And you might implement them bit by bit and improve as you go along. So in a nutshell, this is what the protocol describes as this communication set, and then it's up to the editor side to render it in some shape or form.
So it's like back and forth. You type like a couple characters, and then that chunk is being sent to the backend, processed, and sent back to the editor, so that it's either like sending back autocompletion or sending back syntax coloring information, things like that, right?
Correct. Yeah. So every time you type a character, it sends the changes to the LSP, and then the LSP can decide to advertise new diagnostics, can decide to provide autocompletion. It can also, for example, decide to give, for example, signature help if available and on that line. Some of them are triggered by the user. For example, you right click on something and do find the references. So not everything is done when you type something. Some of them are done when you initialize. For example, getting
Or the outline, I guess, is also something the LSP can take care of, like getting the tree visualization,
the
the
document symbol.
hierarchical visualization of the
Yes,
file.
yes, that's called
That makes
the
sense.
document symbol or the workspace symbols. I will also show a sample of that in this demo.
Nice. Okay, cool. And so yeah, I guess historically, like the main and well-established LSPs would be things like Java, C, Python. Actually, most of those, like for those mainstream languages, I guess the sort of like the de facto reference LSPs are actually Microsoft, right? I think Java is Red Hat, maybe.
They have a list on the same website with all the
Right.
LSPs for different languages. So if you didn't know it exists, you can look it up. I also
Oh,
managed to get
ASN1. Wow, interesting. Cool.
yes, I managed to get this Devicetree registered here as well, and acknowledged by
So
Microsoft.
it's actually, and you knew that question would be coming. So there's no Devicetree because there's already a few extensions, right, in Zephyr, in VS Code that help with Devicetree. Yours is there. Awesome.
Yes.
That's cool. But I guess there are a couple of extensions out there already. Maybe not all of them are actually LSP based, right? Like because basic syntax highlighting doesn't necessarily require LSP. But then I guess there's also the extensions from the Nordic extension suite. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah. So yeah, with regards to other Devicetree LSPs, if we want to call them that, some of them follow the protocol but are implemented, and there's one which is open source and it's implemented but only available for VS Code, so you can't use it for Vim, which is a limitation. And then I found some others which are, for example, implemented for tree-sitter, but again, you need to do some extra work to get it to work. This is more generic, I hope, so it should be a simpler experience to get started.
Okay, cool. And so how does one get started? How do you install? Because this, I mean, in practice, this is some kind of like, this is literally a server that needs to run on your system, but you don't install it directly, right? Like it's packaged as a regular IDE extension, right?
Well, if you're using VS Code or a
Obviously.
VS Code like IDE, yes. So let's start with the easy case. So if you're on VS Code, you can find the Devicetree LSP from the marketplace. You just search for it and then install it like any other extension. If you're coming from a different VS Code line, there's another registry called OpenVSX, and it's also registered there. If you are on any other editor which doesn't support either of these two, then you'd have to install the server manually. And for that reason, the server is on the npm package registry, and you have to install it globally. So in that case, you do npm i -g, so you install it globally, and device language server, which will allow you to basically do the following. Devicetree.
Can you zoom that one a bit, please?
Yes, well, I can. Yeah. So then basically, if you install it globally, I can even show it here like this. And then we do -g. This will install it globally on my machine. And if I were to just run the command device language server, it will end up basically executing the binary. Of course, it will fail because I'm not starting it. And then it's up to the to Neovim, for example, to pass in these flags. I'll show that case now if you want. So once you've installed it globally, this is for users outside of VS Code and outside of a VS Code like IDE.
Could those users be? I mean, obviously these days we see more and more like LLMs being used to write code and like in vibe coding and whatnot. Are you aware of like do like typically do AI agents like Cursor and Copilot and whatnot, would they actually tap into an LSP to sort of automatically get a framework to make sure that they write code that's proper code, I guess?
I'm not sure how deep they go, but for example, Cursor allows you to uses the workspace symbols, uses the document symbols. You can even
so indirectly it gets that. Yeah, I guess.
So
yeah, okay.
also there's more to it. I haven't yet investigated this concept.
Yeah, makes sense. And by the way, in the chat, I think it's like 2/3 for the people who answered at least, which is a couple, a dozen people. It's like 2/3 VS Code, 1/3 Vim, and then some C-Lion. But please do, if you just joined us, whether on YouTube or LinkedIn, do tell us what IDE/code editor you use. And we're going to start with, so do you want to start with Neovim or
yes,
VS Code?
I think I should start with Neovim. And before I do that, I want to address the C-Lion. I'm not sure. Before they didn't use to support the LSP protocol, as far as I recall, but these last couple of months, they did an update for people who buy the license to be able to install any LSP. But I haven't tried it out, so it would be very exciting if someone gives this a try in C-Lion or any other JetBrains IDE, basically. So for NVIM, again, I'm not an NVIM user, I'm mostly a VS Code user, so I've prepared this demo for this presentation. And I installed lazy Vim to get started. And the only file I created was this LSP configuration. And here I am basically defining people who are familiar with laser Vim and Vim configurations. They will understand it better as well. Here I'm configuring the semantic tokens. I'm configuring that I, for example, support formatting, that I support folding ranges. Apart from that, then I'm configuring the actual LSP. Here I'm giving the command, and because I installed it globally via npm a few steps ago, it's found automatically, and I'm passing the minus minus stdio, so it uses the stdio output to communicate back and forth between the client and the server. I'm declaring that the file types when this LSP is triggered is the following two, the TS and the TSI. I should technically have overlay here as well. I omitted it. The root dir is a way for it to basically go down that file and find where your project starts. And this will end up falling in the top dir of your West workspace in this case. And that's helpful because then you can resolve URIs like workspace folder, and therefore I can make these paths relative, and therefore I can work within different. If I have multiple West workspaces, I can change automatically. I don't have to change these paths because it automatically adapts. These are the settings that are required for the LSP to work. So before I show Neovim in action, I would like to just give a quick run through these settings. So you've got the default include paths, and here it's where the LSP will look for header files, where it looks for the TSI files, and it looks for them in the order you present them here. So order is important. And if you make it relative, it will use the working directory as defined here. It can be this variable, or it can be a path which you make absolute. Then we have the default bindings, which is Zephyr, and here I'm giving the path where the bindings are located, the YAML files in Zephyr. A note here is that I have experimental support for Linux bindings as well, but I mostly tried the Zephyr ones. And of course, when you open a DTS,
so there's no configuration wise. There's no like. Oh yeah, no, sorry, I missed that line. You have a line where you actually say whether it's Zephyr or Linux. Okay.
Yes, that's here. And then you have the ability to tell the LSP whether it can automatically change the context. So it tries to understand when you're changing between files. So if I open 3 different board files, it's 3 different contexts, right? Because every DTSI file will be a context for that device. So imagine it's compiled and that generates the end result. That's a context. And if I open 3 different board files, that's 3 different contexts. And the context might reuse, so I might have 2 different contexts using some common DTSI file. So the LSP tries to understand where you are and tries to understand which context you're in, so it can provide the correct IntelliSense, the correct diagnostics, so on and so forth. So you can either enable or disable this. And of course, when you open a file, there's no initial context, and you're telling the LSP you're free to create your own. But if you want to hard code certain contexts, and this is mainly needed when you have overlays, because an overlay is not automatically linked to a board, right? You would have to define the main DTSI files and an array of overlay files, and that is documented in the help, where you can see that these are the settings we just spoke about, and then you have the context itself, where you can define the Devicetree file, the overlay files, and you can also have different bindings if you want. So you can have a context with Linux and context with Zephyr. So you're free to choose and configure your own context. For this demo, I'm going to keep it simple. I'm just going to let it create contexts for me. So apart from that, there isn't much more to configure. So I'm going to quit here, and I'm going to open a file so we can see it in action inside Vim. So let me just yes. So when it starts, initially it doesn't have a context yet, and it's loading the files underneath the hood. When it's done, you see the initial warning goes away, and the color changed inside our UI. And in fact, if I, for example, search, for example, for hover, I can see that I get the pop-up. the on-hover tooltip. And here there is information. I will explain all this information inside VS Code because it's the same. At the end of the day, it's the same server. So here,
So do any of what you're showing, does the LSP require Zephyr at all, as in like a working Zephyr SDK and whatnot, or not, or does it get maybe smarter if it actually has access to a full-blown like Zephyr install, including the ability to like fully compile the app? Like, is
so
it
so if you technically it only needs the Devicetree file and the includes. And if you want to
okay?
make it smarter, give it the bindings. It doesn't need to know about West. It doesn't need to know about
Okay,
any.
yeah,
It
that
has
was
no
my question.
dependencies. So it's quite light as an LSP. It doesn't need any other installations. Basically, if you configure it right, then it basically parses the files correctly, and that's when integrations are helpful. For example, this LSP has already been integrated with the Zephyr IDE extension, which is on VS Code Marketplace, and those configurations are done automatically by that extension and uses the API to tell this extension how and which files to basically create for the context. So back here, we can see that I can see diagnostics. Let me just go to find references. And we can see that, for example, it detects where Flash is used as a label or as a node. And for example, I go to file here, we can see that it says that the compatible property has been replaced by the definition, which means there's another file on top of it, which has redefined that binding. The same way for the status, you can see that nodes which are actually disabled are grayed out. Again, this is configured by LazyVim to show them in this way. So users are free to configure this as they like. And if a node is deleted, I think there should be one here. You should see it crossed out. If there isn't, we can see it in
Well,
on
you can
some.
do it live, I guess.
Yeah,
Could
of
you?
course, I can do that as well. So if, for example, let's do it like this. If I do a node and I will semicolon, and then I forgot semicolon here, so it immediately detects it, and I can, for example, use the code actions, and this will prompt me what the fix could be, and it can edit for me.
Oh,
And
okay.
if I, for example, decide to delete this node, I can do delete node, and then it will autocomplete. As you can see, it is aware of the current delete node. I think I did an extra. Yes, there we go. So, and then we escape. It shows it as deleted. It's crossed out, and it says that the node was deleted. So it gives you all of these features. There's folding ranges. So, for example, if I go to the comment, it gives you this blue line here. It shows you that this is a block. If you go here, it shows you this is a block. This is all coming from the LSP because it knows that that is a segment. It also, for example, knows about signatures. So let me try to find a case for that. Let me go
So,
back here.
so
Yep.
I've never used or even looked at Neovim before. It feels like the decorations that you get, like it's actually richer than what you can set up in VS Code. Is it not? Like the crossing out stuff and adding like sort of permanent tooltip on the side. That's really cool.
I think it has nice features and they're better from VS Code to some extent, but they are very similar as well. But here I'm using the default of LazyVim. So an expert in Neovim can do magic with this. They understand the LSP protocol. They
Yeah.
can create their own keyboard shortcuts. They don't have to constantly type like I'm doing here to get something popped up. They can do a keyboard
Yep.
shortcut or some other automation to get it available. And that's the whole point of this of these tools, that you can customize it, especially if you're a Neovim user for your use cases. So yeah, I think this explains in general Neovim, and for more detail, because I'm more comfortable myself, I would like to switch to VS Code. Are there any questions before I move on from Neovim?
So there's a question from a LinkedIn user. Can Devicetree be used to replace CMake lists file? Probably not. I mean, CMake lists is really to describe sort of like your build configuration and what sources you want to pull into your system. It might be that some compilation units are sort of like guarded and conditioned by what's available on your hardware. But then what's available on your hardware is where you would use Devicetree for. It's really just like two different and complementary things. I guess so. I think I have the name. So yeah, it's Mazda R from LinkedIn. I would encourage you to get familiar with some of those basic Zephyr concepts to either dive into the Zephyr Getting Started guide, or potentially you can also jump on Discord. I will put the link to our Discord community where people will be able to help you. Okay, so now that's VS Code. Is that VS Code or is that Codium? Because I think some
this
people.
Is VS Code. They look the same. I haven't spotted any difference between them when I used either or. So as I said, to install it, you'd have to go to the extensions, you'll search for it, and then it shows up and you click install. In this case, it's already available and configured. Then in VS Code, you have the settings file, which is almost identical to what we saw in Neovim. It's just a different format. Here it's a JSON, and then Neovim was a Lua file. Same settings, same configuration, nothing is different. So I will not go into much details here because we would.
So how much of those? So one needs to actually provide those, or are some of those already sort of like the default? Because it feels like things like ./Zephyr/DTS/bindings. This would, like, for 99% of the people out there, it should already be part of the default, right?
So I did not do a default because, as you know, with the changes in Zephyr between hardware model 1 and hardware model V2, some of these spots actually changed. So it doesn't make, it will overcomplicate the LSP to try to, is it this west, is it that west? It will start binding the LSP to Zephyr, and technically is not a Zephyr specific concept. So you'd have to specify these. Again, if you use an extension which automatically integrates this, you don't have to do it. It does it for you. But if you just use this extension as a standalone, then you have to do it yourself in that case. So I have a couple of features that I would like to show. So I already showed, for example, the on-hover, and I would like to start showing what it can give you. So when you are in a document, you can hover on a node, and the first thing you see on that is the path, the full path of that node. Here I'm hovering over the on the label of that node, and I can see the current state of that node. So that the current state is, if I were to build this project, what ends up in my final the Devicetree file. And you can see also, for example, the macros have been resolved. You can see that they have been calculated for us, but we see them in the comment. For example, dt_size k, it's converted to a hex on the side and converted to a decimal on the other side. So you can see what it actually evaluates to, and not just the macro. But the macro is still there for readability, so you know what the intention was. You also get the description, and the description comes from one of two places. It either comes from the Devicetree spec or from the bindings. If the bindings are available, that supersedes the spec, and that description or examples that are documented there will be available. So if, for example, I go to the binding for the fixed partition, we get to see this text, which also is available for convenience here, with the example also clearly available on the tooltip. You also get to see, let me have a look at my notes. Yes, so the notepad, the node states, description from the docs. Yes, so I would like to show something which I was really keen about. I have an example with the 53 here. So the LSP is aware of where you are in the document. So as you know, for example, here I did this example where I deleted some nodes, and in this example, of course, they are in the same file, but they don't necessarily have to be here. If I hover on this node, I get to see that the state of this node, even though it's deleted, it was prop1 and prop11. But here, even though it's the same node, when I hover on this one, I get to see that it knows about prop2 and prop3. It doesn't consider this node because it's being deleted. So the LSP is aware where a cursor is, and it understands when it parses where it has to stop to give you the current state of that particular node. And similarly, we can see it here, and that in this case, it only knows about prop3 because prop2 has been deleted here, and the node is still active until the end of the file. This becomes handy when we do other stuff like refactoring, find all references, so on and so forth. But I'll show those in a separate part in the same demo. So yes, so that's basically with regards to the hover. One thing I would like to also show is that if you have a case where you have an access or an interrupt, we also add that on hover. For example, here we also show you that the nexus mapping is mapping to this line, and it takes you to the file where it resolves. So you can quickly understand by hovering on it what this ends up translating to when considering all the other settings in Devicetree itself. So that's also part of the on hover tooltip. So you already saw me perhaps navigating between files, so I think it's good to show the document symbols first, and then I can progress to the workspace symbol. So when the LSP understands the document, it can break it down to an abstract tree, and therefore it can completely break it down to its components. So here you can see that I can literally go through each and every item in this file simply by using this tree view. And the LSP is completely aware of every component in that document. Similar to this is the workspace symbols. And in VS Code, to do that, you do either Command T or Control T on Windows, I think. Or you can also do Command Shift P and do the hash. It's the same thing. And for example, I want to find the connector. And this here, I'm showing you all the workspace symbols for this context, which is an RF53 board. And I'm showing you all the labels for nodes, all the node names, and all the includes. So for example, if I want to know where I included a pin control.h, I can, for example, search like this, and then I search for the include, and here I can find the symbol, and it takes me to the file where I've actually included it. So that could be very convenient to understand and navigate between files. Of course, you can also go to definition. I will show it because it's easier to show the concept first here. Let me go back to the 53. So go to definition will take you to the first place where a node was created. So if I do this and though I go to definition, this is node 2, apologies. If I go to this one, it takes me to the, let me see what I did wrong. It's showing me all references. Apologies, declaration. I always confuse these two. So if I go to go declaration, it takes me to the first instance where I've created it.
Would control click do the same? I think so, maybe, right? Like command click would have taken you to the...
Yes, it takes you, well, VS Code does some magic that if it realizes that you clicked on the declaration, it shows all references. So sometimes it does
just one, maybe take you there.
Yeah, but it shows you what it's doing in the title. So here it's showing all definitions, not the declaration. And that's what I did when I opened the path. I can control click and it takes me to the file immediately. So you can you can go to declaration, which takes you to the first instance of where that item was first declared in the document. You can go to definition, which is everywhere where you're adding something to a node. So This will not be, for example, a declaration. This is just a reference, but all of these will be a declaration. And you can also define references. So you can define all references, and this will list everything, even where the better example would be here. Do I have it here? No, I don't. I can do one now. If I, for example, add something here, tree, you will see that if I do find all references on this one, it will show this node, and even though I'm doing it on the label, it understands that it's part of it. And even if prop tree actually references it, like as such, it will then show up in the find all references in the next time I search for it. So you can navigate between files like this, and this is again aware of where you're doing it. So find all references on N1 here is not the same as doing find all reference of N1 here. So they are different in nature. So as you can see, it shows the node and where I've deleted it. So they are different. And I showed it here because it's easy to understand within the same file. But when you have something like this, it's harder to understand because they're scattered around. So if, for example, I want to know where I've declared a root, I can find that I've declared a root in all of these files. If I want to go to the declaration, it immediately takes me to the skeleton, because that's the first place where we've declared it. Yes, so that is mostly with regards to navigation. So you can find the references, definitions, declarations, workspace symbols, and document symbols. Do we have any questions in the chat before I move on?
So the question from Deepan, but I'm not sure if Deepan, you joined after sort of like the second half, the first half, sorry, of this presentation, or I guess maybe the question is like, does any of what you just showed in the last like 10 minutes from VS Code, would everything be available in Neovim as well? I guess to your point earlier, probably yes. You're not a Vim person yourself, so maybe you're demoing where you are the most experienced. But yeah, like all those things to navigate the hierarchy and stuff, this would be available as well, right?
Yes, everything which is part of the LSP protocol will be available in Neovim. Of course, you might have
just
to
different
it.
shortcuts and different sort of.
And there are some other custom commands, which, for example, I use here. Let me compile Devicetree. Yes. So, for example, here I have this generate context output, which is what the compiled version would be, where it basically gives me this output where you can still hook into it from Neovim. You just have to see what I named that particular custom command, and then you can hook into it. I don't know how to do it myself, to be honest, but I've seen others doing it for other LSPs. So you can hook into everything that is available here. There's nothing which is only for VS Code. Yes, so something else which I found really convenient, which is formatting. And so here I've prepared it before. This same node, I've basically folded it down to a one-liner, and when you save, it automatically formats it for you. The rules are hard-coded in the LSP, so they're not configurable at this stage. I don't have any ideas on where I would go with that idea if it's ever necessary, but it is quite flexible. So, for example, if you want an extra line, it allows it, but if you do too many lines, it cleans them out. If you have,
can we get that hooked up in Zephyr CI, basically as a linter for because like usually, so we have coding style and coding guidelines with regards to how people contributing Devicetree files upstream, what they should be doing in terms of like blank lines here and there, and how tabs should be used and whatnot. It would be really cool if we could run that as a. But I guess we can. Like it's just a matter of installing the.
it would be interesting to see what the coding guidelines are and the configurations for them, because I guess people have choice, right? They can do something different, or is it fixed for everyone?
No, it's pretty pretty hard. It's pretty much set in stone. Uh, so yeah, no, yeah, we
Yes.
need to take that offline. That would be pretty cool. What's actually the kind of in that context? I guess that question applies. What's the footprint of, like, if one wants to npm install the LSP? Do you have a sense of how much stuff this pulls? I
It's
mean, this
very
pulls Node,
small.
which is already in itself.
Okay.
Uh,
If we ignore
yes,
Node, it's very small. It's only this number of kilobytes and barely has any dependencies. And most of them are,
really? Oh
yes,
wow.
these two
Yeah,
depend.
YAML, of course,
Yeah,
because you have like a schema and stuff.
these are
Okay,
needed for the Linux
but this
binding.
does it show, like, is that like all the transitive dependencies as well, or just the
Yes.
immediate?
Well, no, I'm not. I don't know underneath the hood. These pick others up.
Yeah, because maybe like YAML is pulling the world.
Most probably
But yeah,
yes.
but that gives a sense already of, like, it's reasonable. Okay, cool.
And also, even if it's not part of CI, if users are immediately using such a formatter from day one and it's already compliant with what
Hmm.
CI needs, then automatically get less CI errors, right? Or if that same
Yes.
configuration can be imported in the LSP, then the LSP can adapt and the user can
Hmm.
format as that project requires. Because again, I'd rather have it configurable than hard coded, but I don't yet have the inspiration on how to make it configurable as of
Yeah,
today.
yeah, that makes sense.
So it's quite flexible. When I edit files, I barely get any diff between what is already there in upstream and what my LSP ends up formatting to. So I use it as a guideline for myself. So maybe we're already very close, and maybe some minor steps are needed there. So yeah, formatting, I don't think there's much more to show. It's something you use and it's convenient. Um, Yes, so we discussed. Yes, so I explained, for example, the concept of contexts. So here I would like to show a case where I've opened the 54L15 with the NS, and I also want to open the equivalent of it without the NS. So let me do that. So if I look, this is also helpful. Most In most places when you use an LSP, the log files end up somewhere. In VS Code, it's in the output tab, and you can find the extension and you can see
Yep.
the output here. And you can also see what's the active context and all the contexts that are loaded in memory. So you can also, if you have any questions or want to find a problem, sharing this log will be very helpful for me to understand what happened underneath the hood. So here we've got two contexts. We've got the 54L15 CPU app, and one of them um, with DNS. And what I would like to show, let me see where the file is. Let me find it. Yes. So if we go to this file, we get to see that we've got an ifdef, and this line is marked as block unused because the macro has been resolved that it's not needed. So if I were to change context, Devicetree saying active context, and I change between DNS and the other one, we get to see the block which is not used being grayed out depending on the context you're on, because this file is being used by two different contexts because of the include. So this is very helpful to understand that if you don't see what you want, if the auto completion is what would you expect, and it's a common file, perhaps you have multiple contexts running underneath the hood, and you just need to switch between them as necessary. So that's something which is very important to be aware of. Something I failed to mention before is that if, for example, we have, let me go back here. Let's see, this is the 54L, yes. So if, for example, I go to this node, it's deleted, and the tooltip shows you who deleted it. So part of the information is you can go here and it takes you to the delete message where that action has been done. And that applies for properties, it applies for not just the delete, but also when the property has been superseded. For example, property replaced, that would be in the SPI, this one. So if, for example, I were to search this node, we have the status, which has been replaced. And here I can go, which is the next property that supersedes it. So it gives you like a chain of links where something was deleted and replaced, and helps you navigate the code in that fashion as well. Something else which is available is autocompletion. So I'm going to go back to the 53 for this example. So if I want to, for example, let's say I want to delete a node. If I try to search for N1 here, it doesn't show up because at the stage of the document, the N1 node has not been created with that label. But if I am underneath it or under its definition, then next time I try to search for it, it will show up and you can delete it. And the second time you try it, it's no longer available. And this is also applicable for properties.
Actually, a question I have might be
Yeah.
related. Performance-wise, like how does it work? Sort of like behind the scenes, like is there an index that the LSP is maintaining so that it doesn't like keep? Oh yeah, you're showing some cache stuff. So I guess because you don't want to like compute everything on the fly all the time, right?
So the cost to start up for complicated files is around, depending on your machine, 2 to 3 seconds to parse all the header files. And then we cache the state of a header file and when the header file was parsed, what macros were available. And next time I need to reparse it, if nothing has changed, I know that it's going to give me the same output for a header file, because if the macros didn't change and they did not edit that header file itself, then I can avoid and reuse the same result as before. With regards to the Devicetree files themselves, it's not trivial to cache everything. And the prime example is when you have something like, I think it's in the peripheral. Yes, in the peripheral here. Sometimes you get to see includes like this, and that makes it a bit more complicated to cache things, because you're including a Devicetree file within a node in some line, and this content technically doesn't even have a root node. So looking at it here, it looks incorrect. If I were to parse it on its own, it looks incorrect. But parsing it in the context of being a child of this node, it then makes sense. So it's hard to cache everything. I'm always striving to improve that. But at the moment, when you type something, it never takes more than 0.2 of a second in the worst case scenario to do something. So if you're typing really fast, there's also a debound. So if you type fast, I will
And usually, and the IDE takes care of some of the UX and making sure that it doesn't lag. Doesn't prevent you from typing, right? It's just a bonus that comes when it's ready.
Yeah. So for example, if I type something now, you can see. Let me see if I can see it down here. I wasn't. So if I press a space, it should show that the content has changed, and it explains what was cached and what it used. And the parsing took 61 milliseconds to do. For parsing, creating the context, understanding where everything is, building the tree structure, so on and so forth. So I think it is sufficient as of now, but of course, I'm always looking for improvements in this regard. Yes, so something which also I would like to mention, there are two types of users. There is the Zephyr developer, which is actually working on the SDK to improve it. And then there is someone who's working on an application, which are
kind of like the questions that Jorge just shared on YouTube. Kind of how will you set up and configure the extension or the LSP when you have GTS out of tree, for example?
Yes. So the configuration will be mostly the same as you have here. The difference would be that the working directly would be your Zephyr base. You'd have to manually put it in here. Also, I've forgotten which version of Zephyr was introduced. When you have a build, there is a build info YAML file, which has all the information. And there was actually a contribution by someone where they got it to work with, let me see if I find it. It's in the README file. Let me see where that was. Right. can't recall. Someone did post on GitHub, and they got it working with the built-in for YAML, and they automatically, when they build, they observe the file and they automatically change the settings to JSON. So you can automate it. But if you're using an extension like this one, Zephyr IDE. This extension automatically detects the LSP and will automatically configure things for you. So you don't have to do it manually. So if it's out of 3, the only thing you have to do is make sure that the paths are relative to the Zephyr base, basically. And if you have some additional bindings or includes which are in your project, you have to remember to add these here. But the build info should give you all the information, the order of how the build system actually used them to generate the result. So I would actually use the build info YAML as a reference point on what to configure here. There's another question. Does it work similarly on overlay files? So yes, the same thing. The only difference is that if you have overlay files and you're not using a third-party extension to automatically configure it for you, you are responsible to specify the DTS file, which is the board, and also the overlay files. And if you do that, then you've automatically linked the overlay
context.
context. Yes. Of course, if you're using extensions which automate this, it's not it's done automatically for you. Yeah, going back.
Yes, Rodrigo. So question is the Tech Talk recorded? It is recorded, yes. So on YouTube, check out the Zephyr YouTube channel. Subscribe to it if you're not already, by the way, because there's interesting content every week coming out of it. I think it's also recorded on LinkedIn, but it will likely sort of disappear from your feed, whereas YouTube sticks more. So yeah, you can. The recording is virtually already available. Like if you want to catch up already on the beginning of the hour while we're still talking, that works. Or you just wait until we're finished, and it will be available. Same link as the live stream.
Yes. So as I was saying before, you've got two types of users: the maintainers of Zephyr itself, who work on Devicetree files, and then people who work with applications. Whether in 3 out of 3, this extension is intended for both. And if you are mainly an application developer, you don't want to perhaps refactor code inside West itself. You don't want to change the SDK. So to safeguard against it, one of the configuration is the default lock rename edits. So if I go to the 53 and I try to rename, for example, node, and I do fanf2, and I, for example, change it to node 1, it refactors it, it's fine. But if I try to refactor the flash, which ends up existing in a child of this directory, when I try to refactor it, it will stop me from doing it, and it will give me an error and says it was locked by the rename edits. So of course, it's up to you to configure this and safeguard yourself from these problems. Hopefully, in the long run, these will be automated and more people will use them in an automatic fashion. But the tools to safeguard yourself from refactoring something you shouldn't be are there. I'm sure they can be improved, and we can add more to them. But the idea is available from the start.
So we have 5 minutes left. One question I have is like, I mean, everything you've shown, pretty much like it feels like in terms of features, there's hardly anything that's missing. But maybe you can comment on things that are still missing. And I guess the rest of the other part of the question is like, so how do people use it, and like what's sort of the roadmap for this? Because I think like right now, this is something you have on your personal GitHub repo, and but like, is this going to become even more mainstream? How can people engage, participate? I mean, yeah, this is probably 10 questions in one, but I thought it would be interesting to cover that while we wrap up.
Yes. So with regards to missing features, I'm sure there are rules in Devicetree which I don't validate for. And again, given I'm not a embedded developer, I don't know they exist, so I will never end up implementing them unless I
Yeah.
get contribution, even if it's in the form of a feature request. So I would really appreciate if people are using it and, for example, find that I report a problem that isn't a problem. For example, here I'm reporting that this should require the reg property. The spec says it's there. Um,
One thing that I spotted, it's kind of like a digression, but as of a couple months back, bindings, in addition to the description, they can have a short title. Is this something you support already, or is just too new?
I
Um,
wasn't aware of it, but I will
okay,
look at the new
I,
bindings and I
I'll
can.
I'll try to send a PR.
That would be nice.
um, um, yeah, it basically makes like for those bindings that have a description that's a mouthful, where sometimes you just care about like what's the name of the sensor, sort of thing, then the title is usually a good place to document just that, and maybe the tooltip would show the title slightly differently. Yeah, okay. But yeah, you're right. I mean, there might be some other language quirks you might not be
Yes.
aware of. Yeah.
I know that I have limitations when it comes to how I parse macros. For example, I've seen in Linux where they put a macro instead of an address, because technically you can put a macro wherever you want, right? Nothing stops you from it, from doing that. But I don't support it everywhere, because otherwise I can't infer, or I haven't figured out a way to infer the meaning of it all the time. So there are limitations on that front. And also, I have no idea what to do with labels with properties. I know you can technically do them in Devicetree, but I do nothing with them so you're free to, for example, add a label here. You're free to add a label here in front of a value. You can do a ternary, but I don't know what they're intended to do. I don't know how they're used in the field. So I didn't do anything with that regard so far. With regards to contributions and my hopes for this project, my hope is that it's used by not just Zephyr users, but anyone with Devicetree, and that this project becomes generic enough for everyone who needs to work with Devicetree to have an LSP that works for that. And I will welcome every sort of contribution, whether it is in code, bug reports, or even feature requests. So I'm looking forward to all type of feedback in that regard.
Awesome. Actually, let me put. I'll put the links in the description of the YouTube video for people to have as a reference. The GitHub repo, the link to the marketplace, ready to install extension. Yeah, okay. So yeah, we only have a few minutes left. People in the audience, now is the time if you have one last question. Otherwise, Kyle, was there anything else we forgot to cover?
There are other points, but
Yeah, I
I
think
have too
back
many
to my
points
question
of the
before.
hour. So,
I probably asked too early, but like when I asked whether you require Zephyr at all or West or anything, and you said no, which is I think great because that makes sense. It makes the thing like more self-contained. But that being said, do you think it could be the extension could be smarter if it had access to the full-blown Zephyr plus modules plus, well, I guess it would, in the sense that it would be able to do some of the things you said the other extension is doing in terms of like looking into the build info, etc. It would be
so
able to tap directly into Zephyr to get that info.
um, yes. So if I were to make it specific to, for example, understand the build info, then it could automatically configure itself.
Mhm.
I don't know whether detecting modules and other or having access to West, whether it would help it. I haven't yet come up with a
Well,
use
it would
case.
help. I mean, if the modules define bindings,
Well, that will
then
end
you
up
would
in
mount
info.
them and make.
That will end up in the build info when you build the project, if it's an application.
So,
So if
sorry, second.
so if I have an application which uses a custom module and there's a binding in it, and I build that project, the path to that binding will end up in the build info YAML. So
Yeah, but you don't even need to build. Like West can already just tell you that. Like it can tell you, hey, your workspace has a module blah for which the binding root is path X in that particular module, and then you could already, without even building,
yeah,
make
so
that
basically
automatically.
determine the default settings, right?
Yeah, yeah. But if it's just for that, then I think it doesn't make sense to sort of like get a hot dependency on the full blown Zephyr just for those
Let
yes,
me
nice additions. But
summarize it. If there was a West command which I could query that can give me for a particular West workspace, gives me all the include paths and all the binding paths, that is of course an advantage. If it's an advantage either for this LSP or
yeah,
for who's
and for that you
integrating
only
it,
require West. You don't necessarily require like a full blown SDK and CMake and whatever. That would be something interesting to explore. With that, I think we're running out of time. So, folks, if you're watching this on YouTube and watching the recording, make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel. And if you're not, and if you're watching live, that applies as well. Gamey, others, we will, I guess, see each other on YouTube. Like, drop any questions, comments you have as a follow up in the comments on YouTube. I will make sure that either Kyle or myself, we will be taking care of them. And we will be back in a few weeks for another Tech Talk. Kyle, thank you very much. Thank you very much. The was pretty seamless. No demo. I mean, the demo gods were with you today. I think it was pretty cool to see everything live in action. Thanks.
cheers. Thanks for
Bye,
inviting me.
everyone.
Thank you.